Hare Krishna, everyone. So today we will begin with Canto 2, Chapter 4, a new chapter, wonderful chapter, the process of creation. So in the last few chapters, starting from Canto 1, Chapter 1, Shukadev Goswami answered in the question of Parikshit very directly. So the question that he answered, what is the duty of everyone? And especially, what is the duty of one who is about to die? So, in the first chapter, after explaining meditation on the universal form, after leaving home by first detaching oneself, and then in the second chapter, meditation on the supersoul with his four arms, and then in the third chapter, Shukadev Goswami explains the process of fulfilling material desires by worshipping demigods. Because whatever one wants, one can get. Then he explains the importance of association, that how it's so important to associate with devotees. And he explained that whether one wants something like the karmis do, or whether one wants to merge into the super soul, or if it is someone with no material desires and one wants to serve Krishna, still everyone has the same duty, that one should worship the Supreme Lord with pointed attention. This is our duty, and it will bring us to the highest platform. So, after describing that and describing how the association of devotees is necessary in achieving that goal, after hearing this, Shaunaka, the head of the sages, wants to hear more. So he asks, what more did Parikshit ask? And what did Shukadev Goswami say? Because both of them were pure devotees. And what they talked about was Krishna. And he wants to hear about Krishna. And then he criticizes those who don't hear about Krishna. It's a way of glorifying Krishna. Shaunaka Rishi criticizes them heavily. He says in the last chapter, those who do not hear about Krishna, they have ears that are like holes where snakes live. Those who don't see Krishna, their eyes are like eyes in the plumes of a peacock. And those who don't speak about Krishna, their tongues are like those of frogs croaking. They are simply inviting snakes to come and eat them up. Even if they are crowned by a turban and have gold bangles, it will only sink them deeper into the ocean of material existence. So he begs Suta Goswami to please, we want to hear more. So in our first slide, we will hear how Parikshit Maharaj gave up his family and all fruitive activities, which basically showed his chastity to Krishna. Because when one is chaste to Krishna, then one understands that this is their prime duty in life, that eventually one has to give up everything. Why? Because the attraction to Krishna is stronger than the material attraction. So I'll read the verse for text 1. Suta uvacha vaya sakir iti vachas tattva nischayam atmana upadharya matim krishne autare satim vyadhat. So Suta Goswami says, Maharaj Pariksit, the son of Uttara, after hearing the speeches of Shukadev Goswami, which was all about truth of the self, applied his concentration faithfully upon Krishna. Prabhupada writes a wonderful purport. I'll read to you a little bit from that purport. He says, fortunately, Maharaj Pariksit had already been attracted to the Lord from the very beginning of his body, in the womb of his mother. In the womb of his mother, he was struck by the Brahmastra atomic bomb released by Ashwatthama. But by the grace of the Lord, he was saved from being burned by the fiery weapon. And since then, the king continuously concentrated his mind upon Lord Krishna, which made him perfectly chaste in devotional service. So, by natural sequence, he was a chaste devotee of the Lord. And when he further heard from Shukadev Goswami that one should worship the Lord only and no one else, even though full of all desires or desireless, his natural affection for Krishna was strengthened. We have already discussed these topics. Now, in text 2, translation. Maharaj Pariksit, as a result of his wholehearted attraction for Lord Krishna, was able to give up all deep rooted affection for his personal body, his wife, his children, his palace, his animals like horses and elephants, his treasury house, his friends and relatives, and his undisputed kingdom. So, here basically, Prabhupada explains in the purport that one can be only renounced if he's attracted to Krishna, isn't it? When one is captivated by the sweetness of Krishna, his activities, his lila, his pastimes. And then the material things will have little significance. The more we are in touch with the life of Krishna, the more we have a life centered on Krishna, the material world will feel like a shadow. So Parikshit Maharaj, at this point, he realized that his body itself, his wife, his children, his animals, his treasury house, his friends, and his relatives, his undisputed kingdom, all are temporary. So what it is that if we identify with the body, then everything related to it, we will also identify. How do we identify with the body is when we need to make it comfortable. Prabhupada explains in the purport that to make the house comfortable, we need a wife or husband. Children, house, car, and we expand and we expand and we expand. So in other words, we went in like a mouse, but an elephant came out, right? So this is household paraphernalia. But when one realizes one's position as a soul, then one's business is to satisfy Krishna. So Prabhupada explains how attachment for household paraphernalia and Krishna don't go together well. One is a path of darkness and one of light. Of course, an expert devotee, he turns everything into light by the attitude of service. So all these material things can be dovetailed to Krishna, and then it becomes a path of light. Now we see that how Yudhishthira Maharaj dovetailed everything in the service of the Lord. So one should be like Parikshit Maharaj. If one hears from a pure devotee, even for one day, then he will lose all affinity for matter. So this is what's happening to Parikshit Maharaj. He's hearing from a pure devotee. So basically, we should not think that dealing with matter itself is bad. One must be only detached from material things for oneself. Otherwise, one will find oneself getting deeper and deeper involved in material life. Now, dovetailing everything to spiritual life frees us from entanglement of material life. It is true. When we make our family Krishna consciousness, when we engage our children in Krishna's, service, and try to see everything as a way meant for pleasing Krishna, this dovetailing will free us from material life. Actually, Prabhupada gives a very nice story about somewhere where he talks about how of a saintly person who came and blessed the king's son. And he said, "My dear son, you live forever." Why? Because he was so sinful that if he died, he would go straight to hell, right? Then he blessed the Muni's son and said, "You don't live, you don't die. I'm sorry, you don't live, but you die." He was such a good son that if he went, he would go back to Godhead. And then he went to the saintly person. He said, either you live or die is all the same thing. Because while living, he's doing so much good, right? He's still in Vaikuntha. He's helping others become Krishna conscious. So living is good and dying is good also because he can go back to Godhead. So Parikshit Maharaj is in this third category. Whether he lives or dies, it's the same. So we should not think, in other words, we should not think that by Krishna consciousness, he lost everything. He was a nice devotee, but still he lost everything. No, this was an arrangement by Krishna to call him back quickly as possible. So text 3 and 4. Oh, great sages, the great soul Maharaj Pariksit, constantly wrapped in thought of Krishna, knowing well of his imminent death, renounced all sorts of fruitive activities, namely acts of religion, economic development, and sense gratification, and thus fixed himself in his natural love for Krishna and asked all these questions exactly as you're asking me. So these are two levels happening here. Shukadev Goswami is speaking to Maharaj Pariksit, and Sutta Goswami was in the audience. So later, he's reciting this conversation to the sages in Naimisharanya. So Sutta Goswami is telling what Maharaj Pariksit is going to be asking now, the questions he's going to ask of Shukadev Goswami. So here, let me read you. So in text 3 and 4, what's happening is Maharaj Pariksit, he's sitting down and he's given up all attachment to matter, which ultimately brings death and will steal away everything anyway. He gives up all practices, including all karma kanya things, everything, you know. And here in this wonderful purport, Prabhupada explains, gives examples, very nice purport, where he gives example of other great souls, other Mahatmas, who also gave up all karma kanya conceptions of life. And he talks about Lord Chaitanya, you know, in his beautiful Shishastika prayer, where he's in the mood of Radharani, and he's saying that Krishna, whatever you do with me is fine. Whether you trample me or you embrace me, you're still my Lord. And then he quotes Rupa Goswami as saying that, you know, whatever you like to, you can do with me. So in this way, and of course, Madhavendra Puri, a very nice verse, which I'll read to you. He's writing, "O my evening prayer, all good fortune and all good unto you. O my morning bath, I bid you goodbye. O demigods and forefathers, please excuse me. I'm unable to perform any more offerings for your pleasure. Now I have decided to free myself from all reactions to sins simply by remembering anywhere and everywhere the great descendant of Yadu and the great enemy of Kansa. I think this is sufficient for me." Well, so what is the use of further endeavors? So we have to understand that when we become a devotee of Krishna, it's not that easy. We still have all this support around us, isn't it? We call it scaffolding, right? But when we think of death, we are kind of afraid of leaving all this scaffolding, you know, all these support system that we have around us. But we are terrified. But for Maharaj Pariksit, he was so internally situated in Krishna that it was not a problem. It was not a problem. So everything, because he was attracted to Krishna from day one, and he understood that everything that is to be found here is found in the spiritual world, but in a more purified existence. You know, Prabhupada says that how sometimes Mayavadi, they cannot understand this Krishna consciousness. They cannot understand devotional service. They cannot understand the love between Radha and Krishna, what they experience, because they've had a bad experience in material life. So they want to make it zero. They want to make it zero. And then they say this whole world is false. But Prabhupada is saying, no, whatever we see in this material world comes with misery. And we don't want it. We want to enjoy that sense gratification, but we don't want to experience the result of that, because the result is miserable. But he says there's another condition in the spiritual world, which is not miserable. So the love between Radha and Krishna doesn't come with misery. It doesn't come with difficulty, with burdens, right? So in this way, it's not Maya. So, of course, Prabhupada writes how they cannot accommodate this idea, and therefore they deny it. So, Krishna consciousness is trying to give people happiness, which is simply blissful. We just have to change our consciousness. So, instead of making things beloved here, we should make Krishna our beloved. So, Pariksit Maharaj gave up everything, his kingdom, so he became blissful, and he began to ask questions. That leads us to our next slide. How does the Lord, and that's his first question, how does the Lord create, maintain, and wind up through his energies and expansions? So, text 6, Pariksit Maharaj is asking, I beg to know from you how the personality of Godhead, by his personal energies, creates these phenomenal universes as they are, which are inconceivable even to the great demigods. So, in other words, he wants to know how the Lord creates this world through his energies. This Prabhupada writes how this universe is inconceivable. The scientists can get the greatest, strongest microscopes, but still they are not able to understand the universe. And the more they try to break it down, the more complicated it gets. In text 7, kindly describe how the Supreme Lord, who's all powerful, engages with different energies and different expansions in maintaining and again winding up the phenomenal world in the sporting spirit of a player. So he's asking how the Supreme Lord engages his energies and his expansions in maintaining and winding up this world. And Prabhupada gives the wonderful example of an original candle which lights up the other candle. And when it does that, the original candle does not lose its power, just like the sun, which gives so much light and heat, yet the sun does not lose its powers. So, in the same way, we can understand that Krishna, who has so many energies that come from him, which is basically maintaining this and creating, maintaining, and destroying this universe, is not lessened in any way. So, what he's basically asking, how can this powerful Lord maintain and wind up and ultimately destroy? So, the point that we have to understand that unless we have a clear understanding how Krishna is so wonderful and so powerful, so different from us, we cannot really understand him. We cannot really appreciate his spiritual activities in the spiritual world. We will think that it is material. Because when Krishna dances with the gopis, it is nothing like when someone dances here. It's spiritual, it's completely different. As iron is to gold, as love is to lust. So the real relationships, this which satisfy one, exists in the spiritual world. But we're trying to find it here. So before Shukadev Goswami, explains these spiritual relationships in Canto 10, Pariksit Maharaj is asking questions to give us a true idea of what God is. And also to warn us that if someone comes along and says he's God, they're not God, and what it really means to be God. So to check those tendencies in ourselves and in others, he gives an understanding what it means to be God. For example, in Canto 5, we're going to hear about that, the millions of universes, how they are just like mustard seeds on Ananta Shesha. And how and these mustard seeds, and these universes, they're just like a spark of the splendor coming from Krishna, as Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, right? So that when we come to the 10th canto, that same Krishna, when he's walking around Vrindavan, herding the cows with no shoes, we can appreciate him. So that leads us to our next slide, how the scientists are stumped. They cannot understand this universe. And there are millions more. They cannot understand the length and breadth of this universe. In text 8, O learned Brahmana, the transcendental activities of the Lord are all wonderful, and they appear inconceivable because even great endeavors by many learned scholars have still proved insufficient for understanding them. So Prabhupada writes in the purport how scientists who are attempting to explore outer space and are trying to reach other planets by mechanical arrangements must know for certain that organisms adapted to the atmosphere of Earth cannot exist in the atmospheres of other planets. That's an easy journey to other planets. One has to prepare himself, therefore, to be transferred to a different planet after being relieved of the present body. So Prabhupada really criticizes people who have a mechanistic view of life, which means they have no conception that God is the one who's creating it and he's the intelligent designer. And for them, these things remain inconceivable. Even a very insignificant part of his creation. Just think what a universe is, right? It's such a one universe. It's such a small part of his creation. What to consider our planet only, right? What to consider the country that we're living in, and what to consider a little city that we are living in. They have no conception, he's explaining, how many stars and planets there are in this universe, and how each of these planets have different conditions whereby only people who have those conditions, those kind of bodies, they can live there. So anyway, so this is very well spoken by Srila Prabhupada in this pulpit. And then in text 9, he says, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is one. Whether he, Pariksit Maharaj is saying, whether he alone acts with the modes of nature or simultaneously expands in many forms or expands consecutively to direct the modes of nature. So the point here is that he's asking for our benefit is that we have to understand that if Krishna is one God and he's an individual, then how can he expand himself like that? If he's doing so much maintenance, so much creation, maintenance, and destruction, then how can he have time to have fun with the gopis? Huh? So he's doing it himself, but so how is he doing it through his expansions? And what about these expansions? Do they come one after another? So in text 10, he's kind of asking to be explained. He's asking for an explanation. So what's happening here, that here in the first 3 chapters, the worship of Krishna has been established, okay, in the first 3 chapters. And in this 4th chapter, the questions are being asked regarding the Lord's creation, maintenance, and destruction, and the Lord's relationship with the material world. And then in the 5th and 6th chapter, the Lord's inconceivable relationship with the material energy is described. And in the 7th chapter, how the Lord enters the material world through his Leela avatars. And in the 8th chapter, the 3 Purusha avatars will be described. So this will take us to our next slide. The Lord's activities are inconceivable. Okay, but pure devotees can understand him. So the Lord's activities are inconceivable, and this will be covered in verse 10. Kindly clear up, Pariksit Maharaj asking, kindly clear up these doubtful inquiries, because you're not only vastly learned in the Vedic literatures and self-realized in transcendence, but are also a great devotee of the Lord and are therefore as good as the personality of Godhead. So Prabhupada writes in the pulpit, Maharaj Pariksit admitted in the previous verse that the Lord is inconceivable, even for the greatest learned scholars. Then why should he again request Shukadev Goswami to clarify his insufficient knowledge about the Lord? The reason is clear. Not only was Shukadeva Goswami vastly learned in the Vedic literatures, but he was also a great self realized soul and a powerful devotee of the Lord. A powerful devotee of the Lord is by the grace of the Lord more than the Lord himself. The personality of Godhead, Sri Ramachandra, attempted to bridge the Indian Ocean to reach the island of Lanka. But Sri Hanumanji, the unalloyed devotee of the personality of Godhead, could cross the ocean simply by jumping over it. The Lord is so merciful upon his pure devotee that he presents his beloved devotee as being more powerful than himself. The Lord expressed himself to be unable to save Durvasa Muni, although the Muni was so powerful that he could reach the Lord directly under material conditions. But Durvasa Muni was saved by Maharaj Amrish, a devotee of the Lord. Therefore, not only a devotee of the Lord is more powerful than the Lord, but also worship of the devotee is considered more effective than direct worship of the Lord. And then he goes on to say, that is the reason why one should approach a spiritual master. That is the reason why one must have a spiritual master and go to him first. Because without his help, one cannot make progress in spiritual life. So now that leads us to our next slide, where Shukadeva Goswami, he does not immediately answer Pariksit Maharaj's questions and offers and gives the reason why he doesn't immediately answer Pariksit Maharaj's question. Instead, offers praise and glorifies him. Suta Goswami said, when Shukadeva Goswami was thus requested by the king to describe the creative energy of the personality of Godhead, he then systematically remembered the master of the senses, Sri Krishna, and to reply properly, he spoke thus. So why he did not answer directly? Because Shukadeva Goswami was an exalted devotee, and he knew that it was not easy to answer these questions. That the power of answering these questions is beyond one's own individual power. And therefore, he remembered the Lord, the master of the senses. And he's basically praying to Krishna for the ability to answer the questions. Now, from the 12th verse to the end of the chapter, which is like 11 verses, Shukadeva Goswami is, before he begins to answer the question, which will be in the next chapter, he offers his obeisances to Krishna. He offers his respects to the Supreme Person whom he's trying to glorify. He understands that without the blessings of Krishna, he will not be able to do it. And Prabhupada explains in the purport how this is the qualification of being a preacher, to be in this mood like Shukadeva Goswami. You know, that how a preacher should understand that the Lord is inconceivable, how powerful he is, and in order to represent the Lord properly through his words and actions, how he should surrender to the Lord. So this first principle of devotional service is being taught by Shukadeva Goswami. He didn't rush into answering the questions because he was vastly learned. He was a Paramahansa. He was fully qualified. And these are some of the, it's just like, there are some things which is beyond us, right? For example, if the government has a $30 billion debt, we cannot understand that. So how can we understand Krishna's inconceivable potencies? Now that has to be first acknowledged. That he's inconceivably powerful, and we are very, very tiny, completely dependent on him. And that only by his grace can we understand him. And therefore, Shukadeva Goswami had already described that no matter who we are, what kind of desires we have, we should worship the Lord. Here, he's showing by his own example that before beginning any activity, one should worship the Supreme Lord. Now, we have to understand how great God is and how he's worthy of that worship. So Krishna basically, Prabhupada describes how he's the complete whole, which means that he's everything. He's the totality of everything. There's nothing outside of him. He and his energy is comprised of everything, and therefore he uses his energies. So even though he's a complete whole, he's an individual, yet he's residing within the bodies of everyone. So what the confusion is for materialists is, how is it possible for the complete whole to be within the heart of everyone? And the answer is, his ways are inconceivable. So now we're going to hear more about his inconceivable nature before we can take shelter of him. So first we have to actually have realization of his inconceivability. Otherwise, we will not be able to trust him, trust Krishna. So this leads us to our next slide. How does the Lord deal with us? That's covered in verse 13. Translation. I again offer my respectful obeisances unto the form of complete existence and transcendence, who is the liberator of the pious devotees from all distresses and the destroyer of further advances in the atheistic temperament of the non-devotee demons. For the transcendentalists who are situated in the topmost spiritual perfection, he grants their specific destinations. So Shukadeva Goswami explains that how the Lord, what he's explaining here, he's a liberator of the pious devotees, and he's the destroyer of the demoniac people. And to the pious devotee, he frees them from all material distress. And he destroys atheistic tendencies. So in other words, he is granting their specific destination. That's what he's saying in this prayer. So in other words, Krishna deals with us individually according to our desires and our nature. And really, this is the key to understanding Krishna, how he deals with different people. So he's doing good to all. So Prabhupada explains in the purport how there's two kinds of Paramahansas. One is, even though he's in the material body, his consciousness is situated in Krishna. They don't actually reside here. The other is the impersonalist who wants to become the supreme. And how he deals Krishna with him, he absorbs him into his effulgence. So the first one, they're lovers of Krishna. They're the Premanandis, and he brings them to his own abode, to the spiritual world. But the question is this his only business? Is this Krishna's only business, to award their desires and to reciprocate with them in this way? Is that all he does? No. He is also in a supreme position as a supreme enjoyer. He's simply giving what people, living entities, desire. That leads us to our next slide, how Krishna is a problem for the non-devotees. Text 14. Let me offer my respectful obeisances unto him, who is the associate of the members of Yadu dynasty and who's always a problem for the non-devotees. He is the supreme enjoyer of both the material and spiritual worlds, yet he enjoys his own abode in the spiritual sky. There is no one equal to him because his transcendental opulence is immeasurable. So Krishna, Prabhupada explains, is always a problem for the non-devotees. They cannot understand really the mentality of the Lord. And they cannot even explain why he's the supreme person. And they cannot even stop him either from being the supreme person. Yet Krishna, undisputably, he's the creator, the lawgiver, the ultimate destroyer, and the controller. And these are just his secondary names. They're not even his primary names. And they have only to do with creation. These names have got to do only as him being the creator of the material world. But Krishna, when we think about it, he existed even before the creation. He was there even before the creation. So what does he do before the creation? Is he just sitting around and waiting around? No, because he's the supreme enjoyer, he's actually in the spiritual world. And non devotees have no access to understanding him because his material world is basically created for those who are sinful, isn't it? So they have no ability to understanding what is in Golok Vrindavan. That leads us to our next slide. Hearing about him purifies all sins and frees one from all attachments. This is what's going to be explained in these verses of glorification by Shukadeva Goswami. He's saying in text, in verse 15, let me offer my respectful obeisances unto all the auspicious Lord Shri Krishna, about whom glorification, remembrances, audience, prayers, hearing, and worship can at once cleanse the effects of all sins of the performer. Let me offer my respectful obeisances again and again unto all auspicious Lord Shri Krishna. The highly intellectual, simply by surrendering unto his lotus feet, are relieved of all attachments to the present and future existences and without difficulty progress towards spiritual existence. Then the text 18 is quite famous. Kirata, Huna, Andhra, Pulinda, Pulkasha, Abhira, Shumba, Yavana, and members of the Khasad races, and even others addicted to sinful acts, can be purified by taking shelter of the devotees of the Lord, due to his being the supreme power. I beg to offer my respectful obeisances unto him. Now, in the purport, it's a long purport, and Prabhupada explains where all these people are currently located. And he's saying that although accustomed to sinful things, they can be purified by taking shelter of the Lord. And how is this possible? Prabhupada explains, because he's unlimitedly powerful. Just like the sun, it can destroy unlimited amounts of darkness. So ultimately, sin, which is ultimately ignorance, can be purified by association with the Lord's devotees. And Prabhupada is especially referring to Brahmanas in India who say that those born in the family of Brahmanas, they can be liberated from the world, from this world. And so this verse refutes that. So what these Brahmanas, they decry the power of the Lord. They don't want to accept the version of the Shastras. But Prabhupada explains, who can stop this purification? What can they do? So actually, we have to understand that when Prabhupada wrote this second canto, first canto he wrote in Vrindavan, in India. But the second canto he wrote in the West. So it was right around 1968. And at that time, there was a lot of opposition in India because Prabhupada was making Westerners into first-class Brahmanas. So here, so he's writing, he's giving everything in this purport. And how devotion is so powerful, devotional service is so powerful that the heart can be changed, regardless of anyone's birth. And we see that in the life story of Lord Chaitanya in his mission, how he converted many people of lower births himself. So in text 19, he is the super soul, Pariksit Maharaj, Shukadeva Goswami says, he is the super soul and the supreme lord of all self-realized souls. He is a personification of the Vedas, religious scriptures, and austerities. He is worshipped by Lord Brahma and Shiva and all those who are transcendental to all pretensions. Being so revered with awe and veneration, may that supreme absolute be pleased with me. So he's saying that those people who worship are free from all pretensions. Now, what does the word pretensions mean? It comes from the word pretend, right? So pretensions basically means hypocrisy. So a person who's free from all hypocrisy, which is basically that when we go to the temple, and if we pray to the Lord to give me this and that, that is hypocrisy. So Krishna can really be worshipped by those who are without this hypocrisy. Because that should not be the limit of our relationship with Krishna. So this leads us to our next slide, which is Shukadev Goswami asked the Lord to be merciful to him, and which is our last slide, from verse 20 to 25. Verse 20, may Lord Krishna, who is the worshipful Lord of all devotees, the protector and glory of all the kings, like Andhaka and Vrishni of the Yadu dynasty, the husband of the goddess of fortune, the director of sacrifices, and therefore the leader of all living entities, the controller of all intelligence, the proprietor of all planets and spiritual and material, the supreme incarnation on the earth, the supreme all in all, be merciful unto me. So we've heard so far the questions of Pariksit Maharaj, and now Shukadev Goswami, as a humble Vaishnava, he's offering his obeisances to the Lord because he knows that the questions are so difficult that only if Krishna will empower him, he will know the answer. What a humble Vaishnava. So no one really can understand the creation. It's very, very complicated. And this creation, which is done by Krishna, and then secondary creation by Brahma. Why? Because the banyan tree of the material world is very complex. One cannot understand where it begins and where it ends. So therefore, Krishna recommends how, and so therefore, Shukadev Goswami is going to explain in our next chapter how to use this facility in the material world to free ourselves from material energy. So to do that, he's praying to the Lord so that he's able to give us this knowledge, how to use the facility in material world to free ourselves from material energy. So in the last few verses, he's kind of glorifying and begging the Lord for that mercy. So he's a great soul. So here I think, let's see. Yeah, there's a couple more verses here. So actually, I don't have the verses somehow. Yeah, let me see if I can find these verses here. Sorry. My Veda base just got. So in text 24, he says, I offer my respectful obeisances unto Srila Vyasadeva, the incarnation of Vasudev, who compiled the Vedic scriptures. The pure devotees drink up the nectarian transcendental knowledge dropping from the lotus-like mouth of the Lord. Text 25. My dear King Brahma, the firstborn, on being questioned by Narada, exactly apprised him on this subject, as it had been directly spoken by the Lord to his own son, who was impregnated with Vedic knowledge from his very birth. So I'll stop here and I'll give it over to Rati Preshta for explanation on the guidebook. But before I do that, I just wanted to appreciate somebody on the call here, and that is Geeta Mataji, who's from Pune, and who's been helping us in many ways, especially with the technical part of presentation, as well as uploading videos and things like that. So Geeta Mataji, can you come and show yourself? Thank you. I just want to appreciate her for all her work and her hard work.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mataji. It's pleasure to help you. Actually, I get to learn so much through this process, and you are really an inspiration for working mom. Like, thank you so
So,
much.
so Geeta, she's pioneering a lot of classes in her area, where she's helping other mothers to start this online programs. Right now, it's online for teaching children Srimad Bhagavatam, and she's spearheaded quite a few over there, and she's training them through her own presentations. And I think they're doing Canto too right now. Some of them. Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you, Geeta, for so much for all your help.
Thank you, ma'am.
She's our technical support. Thank you. So we'll give it over to Rati Preshta now for explanation.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Mataji, for helping us to understand the inconceivable nature of the Lord in such a beautiful manner. Now I will just share the slides for guidebook.
So these are
Yeah.
new books. Can you show that picture again, the front one? Yeah. So these are the newly laid out books. Now we have all these books in available for those who are in America or elsewhere in the Western world. They can get these books on Amazon, and look out for the one volume sets. We still have the two volumes also available on Amazon, and it may get a little confusing, but look out for these one volume sets because uh, they they are redesigned. The material is the same, but they're redesigned and they're more handy because they are in one volume, and they're cheaper to get these one volume sets. So we have a wonderful layout artist who's done a really good job in in and we have also new pictures that go with these chapters. So thank you.
So the chapter starts with a story summary. As always, it is very interactive, and children can actually imagine the story being depicted in front of their eyes when they are reading these story summaries. The sages at Naimisaranya were very eager to hear the conversation between King Pariksit and Sukhdev Goswami. Please tell us more, said Sonakarishi to Suta Goswami. Yes, please tell us more, piped the rest of the sages. So this way it goes on. And it has a very beautiful poetic explanation also in last few stanzas. So it gives all the prayers which were said by Sutta Goswami. It has depicted all the prayers in a beautiful poetic expression, which is very wonderful to read and hear. And then there are key messages which again can help children to memorize the entire meaning to memorize the entire chapter and to apply the understanding in their lives. And then there are these understanding the story questions, which are based upon the story, and they are in multiple choice forms, which are sometimes easy to understand. Some are little between the lines also. So it helps children to well comprehend the entire story. And then these are higher thinking order questions, which will again help children to go deeper into Prabhupada purports, reflect upon them, discuss with their peers, and then come up with more strong conviction about the philosophy. Then the activities, beginning with action activities. This is one fantastic way to remember the Lord's lotus feet and various symbols which are there on Lord's lotus feet. So here there are different ways which children can, in which children can do this activity. First one is that children can be divided into two teams, or two children can play this at a time, and only the boundary of lotus feet can be drawn by the teacher, and children can remember the symbols and then draw them. And it can be a kind of competition, who remembers most or who can draw most of the symbol in a given time. So like this, or otherwise children can also, if they are younger children, they can, one of them can tell the symbols and the other one can draw. It depends upon the age and capacity of children, so it can be used in various ways. And then there are critical thinking activities, being first one is the mind of pure devotees. So again, here the participants are divided into two groups, and they it is a kind of debate and a discussion upon children will present opposing viewpoints. So one will say that did Parikshit Maharaj made a good decision when he left his kingdom and his family who was dependent upon him. So one team would say that yes, it was a good decision, but the other team would counter argue. So this way children will have a debate and then come to the conclusion that how finally Parikshit Maharaj's thinking was different from what common man does, and how his wonderful qualities of devotion helped him and gave him the spiritual strength to make these decisions in his life. And then there is inconceivable Lord, another very nice way of engaging with the philosophy in the modern context, wherein in text 8, in purport also Prabhupada has given reference to some philosophers, some astronomers, and he has actually quoted what they are saying. So children can read the purport in detail and then realize that how there are different maybe scientists, some astronomers, they can do a research and then find out how they also acknowledge the almighty power, even after their all efforts and abilities to try and understand the universe, they still sometimes show their insignificance. And this research can be done, and they can present some quotes by different philosophers or astronomers or scientists like this. And then children can discuss on the role of Srimad Bhagavatam in helping us to understand the Lord's creation. Then this is an activity called walking up to disciplic succession, which help children to understand that how this all spiritual knowledge is actually coming in line from Krishna, and how what is the importance of disciplic succession in gaining spiritual knowledge. So this is how they have to trace from the sages of Naimisharanya, who was actually guiding and training them, then who was from whom they were taking the instruction. So like this, they have to cut out these small boxes, make the pictures, and write the name of consequent spiritual leaders, and right up to Krishna. So how this Vedic knowledge is coming directly from Krishna. And then there are some analogy activities which again help children to understand better. It also equips children with more of critical thinking and being able to, make analogies, understand the situation at hand in a better way. So Prabhupada gives an example of how Pandavas are the best example of how they can turn everything into service of the Lord. So Prabhupada gave an example of Pandavas. So here children can do a small research from Mahabharata, and they can try to understand which are the most important qualities in each of the Pandavas, and then these prompt questions, if the children are of little higher age, these prompt questions can also be asked, and it can be a kind of research on Mahabharata, and to understand how these qualities were depicted in Pandavas. Then comes artistic activity. So this is a universe pop-up card, very nice and interesting and creative way to help children understand, how Krishna is Supreme Lord and the controller of all universes and everything within the universe. So these are small paper springs which are made, explained how to, it is also very nicely explained in this activity how children can make this. So in between they can make various springs, and then they can show the planets, the stars, even the vegetables, the fruits, various animals, plants, trees, human beings, everything within the universe is actually coming from Krishna. So this is a creative way to express children's ideas. And then also this is a universe art activity, use of crayons and watercolors to depict various planets and galaxies and stars and moons, so children can show their own creativity through art. And then there are introspective activities, another very important activity wherein the reflective dimension of children can come up. And this was very interesting when my daughters were doing this activity. They brought all kind of their toys, their jewelry, their makeup stuff, their piggy banks, everything was brought and set up, and they were like kings, Pariksit Maharaj, imagining themselves to be Pariksit Maharaj. And then I really saw how difficult it was when they were told to part away with all these things. So when they were imagining that they have to now leave and they have to part away with all these things, it was difficult for younger one to even part away with jewelry and toys, and elder one was kind of finding it difficult to part away with her children, meaning she was imagining that she is Pariksit Maharaj, so it was becoming difficult. She was saying, I will take my children along. So this is how it helps children to understand and go deep into, how to develop these kind of qualities, and then various other discussions can be led to help children understand, what kind of qualities Parikshit Maharaj had, that he was able to show his detachment, and how children can gradually develop these qualities. And then there is this nice reflective activity of Dear Diary, wherein children have to um, imagine now that they are Shukdev Goswami, and they are praying to Krishna before explaining the process of creation as Shukdev Goswami did. So this is what my daughter has written. Oh dear Krishna, I offer my respectful obeisances unto you, who appear in the material world whenever there is a decline in religion, to reclaim the fallen souls back to Godhead. Oh my Lord, oh Supreme Personality of Godhead, please be merciful upon me, so that I may become servant of your eternal servants, who find shelter only at your lotus feet. You are the cause of all causes, but for you there is no cause. Those who have attained the dust of your lotus feet never hanker for anything, even up to Brahmaloka. So this is how she has kind of developed, she has um, written this prayer out of whatever she has learned from Bhagavatam only. And then these are linguistic activities to get the words right, wherein children have to unscramble the words. Again, a very wonderful way to help children repeat the story, and then simultaneously develop their language skills. Then punctuation practice, wherein they have to put comma, that is apostrophes, question marks, capitals, all those have to be taken care of. Then reading and comprehension, again, this is a very interesting activity, wherein first they have to find out various things which they found in this chapter, then various interesting things, why they found them interesting, and then some questions that they may have. And then this connective word exercise or sentence writing, wherein they have to use these connective words and complete the sentences, which the samples have been given here. And then this sequencing exercise, wherein again a very wonderful way to help children understand the entire story in a sequence, which helps also to summarize the story very nicely. Again, it gives an impression of entire chapter in the minds of children. They can also refer to the chapter once again while doing this activity. And then these are true or false, the extended true or false, wherein children have to either agree or disagree with the statement, and then they have to use their argument to say why they have chosen to agree or disagree with the statement. And then these are word search. It is so interesting that this book is simultaneously taking care of all the age groups. So even a 5-year-old child can find so many interesting activities, and even 14-year-old children will find it very useful. So according to age, it can be molded and used in so many different wonderful ways. And then glorifying Krishna. So this is again a very interesting way of helping children to meditate upon Lord's qualities, and how children can actually refer to the Shukdev Goswami prayers, and some hints and prompts are given, and how children can then formulate their own prayers. Such a wonderful, deep, introspective way of glorifying Krishna by children. I really found it very helpful. And then punctuation practice again for little older age groups, jumbled up words. Again, all the words are from Bhagavatam, from the same chapter. And then one person, many forms. Here they have to explain that how Krishna can appear in various forms. They have to draw some picture and the purpose of that form, and what is the learning that they have got from that particular form of Krishna. And then the keywords, part of the speech they have to identify, they have to define it, then synonym and antonym, then older kids word search, and then finally the answers, which are again a very very systematically presented for all the activities that are given. The answers are provided even for crosswords, for sequencing, for punctuations, so that children can actually refer to the answers and find out whether they have made some mistakes or are going in a right track. So these are jumbled up, and then keywords, definitions, synonyms. So with this, I end my presentation and open the session now for questions. So thank you all very much. And you can raise your hands. I will change the settings so that you can unmute yourself and ask questions.
Thank you, Rati. Wonderful presentation of the activities and the activities, so many of them done by your children. Thank you.
Yes, Jyoti Mataji has question. Mataji, you can unmute yourself. Yeah, Mataji?
Hare Krishna.
Yes,
Yes.
Mataji.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Yes, Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Mataji, for wonderful class.
Thank you.
Mataji, in this word, Andhra, Pulinda, this is mentioned. So when we were reading in our Mataji's group, no, when Mataji was from Andhra Pradesh, so she was saying that is it that the from non-Vedic tribe or the tribal people, do these people belong, like that? She was saying.
Yeah. So in other words, I mean, originally that's what Prabhupada says. These people came from this, for example, he describes the different types of people and where they came from. So it doesn't reflect, ultimately the message of the Bhagavatam is that we are not this body, So where we come from and what is our body, and it's not of relevance for somebody who's a devotee of the Lord, I mean, right now, I mean, even like places like China, is considered, not a place where it's very sinful, people coming from that part of the world. But today we find that these Chinese devotees, I mean, I personally interacted with them during the pandemic. I was giving seminars over there. They were so wonderful devotees, so inspiring. And they're translating all these books from English to Chinese, publishing them, and distributing them. So in other words, this could be where they come from, and this could be part of their bodily, we relate it to that in the bodily sense, but it has nothing to do with our soul, as to who we are. So we have to go beyond that. So that when you teach your child, you have to explain that very clearly, that our birth is irrelevant, where we come from. Okay.
Yes. Mataji, I have some questions regarding homeschooling, but maybe after others' questions, I can ask you, Mataji.
Okay. Yes. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Mataji.
Anybody else would want to ask, or Jyoti Mataji can continue, maybe if we can wait for others. Jyoti Mataji, you can proceed till the time we have other questions.
Okay, Mataji. Mataji, I have started homeschooling my daughter, who is in 7th standard. So Mataji, what Prabhuji goes to office by 6:30. So we don't have a morning program, Mataji. So I want to start a morning program, but I'm not feeling that impetus. And I have many health issues also, like thyroid problems and other problems also I have. So I'm not feeling enthusiastic. So please encourage me.
Well, do what you can, especially if you're struggling so much with your health and everything. So what you could do is make the morning program very flexible. In other words, you don't have to morning program. If you don't have to do it very elaborate. In other words, you all with your children, you can stand in front of the altar, and one of your children can do the incense, and you can just sing, do the incense and a flower, and a fan. They love doing that, so the incense, flower, fan, you can do that while you sing the Guru Astika prayers and all, and Nashinga prayers. You sing that. So that is not taking too much effort. You're not doing an elaborate worship. But the idea is to start the day thinking and singing about the Lord, because it puts the children and everyone, all of us, into a very good frame of mind, you know, in a peaceful frame of mind, in a spiritual frame of mind, where we can think of Krishna all day, So that's why householder life means that we engage our children all day if they're at home in Krishna consciousness. Whatever they're doing, we remind them of Krishna, and we help them to understand that how Krishna is really the chief object of our worship. He's our chief guest, and everything should be dovetailed to him. So they're offering the food. You can take their help in offering the food, and because you're teaching, if you're teaching Bhagavatam, they're reminded of Krishna all the time, right? So that's the idea. So you don't have to make it very difficult for yourself. Just make it very simple. And you can do morning program even after your husband leaves. The idea is to start the day, and to remember the Lord, the first thing before you begin your school or whatever you're doing. So it can be done even after that. Okay.
Mataji, seeing my daughter, I have two children. So my son also, he also wants to do homeschooling, but his interest is like he's too much, you can say, addicted to chess. He loves playing chess. So he wants to go into that chess. That's why he wants to do homeschooling. So Mataji, then I will find it very difficult for him to again, manage both the children first of all, and then Krishna Krishna conscious, making him Krishna conscious.
Yeah. Well, homeschooling is. I don't know why why you're homeschooling one but not the other. You may have good reasons, but if he's interested in a chess, then that's no problem. Even then, homeschooling is good. Because he can pursue that, but then you still will have time. He still will have time to do his work, and you can make that clear with him. He still needs to do his schoolwork, and you get a chance to teach him Bhagavatam. So homeschooling is valuable no matter how you package it. That's the thing, because they are, they are able to, not be pick up the values from outside. That's the main thing. Why we have to be very clear as to why we want to homeschool them. If you're simply doing it for academic reasons, it's okay. But beyond that, as devotees, we want to make them, Krishna conscious, and to give them a very good taste of Krishna consciousness. Okay. So you can still do it even while he pursues his interest in chess, But he should be clear that homeschooling also needs study, some level of study. Okay.
Thank you, Mataji.
Thank you. Okay. So, Hare Krishna.
Yes, Mataji, if there are no more questions
today. Okay. So we can just stop early. Thank you all for being there and appreciating Srimad Bhagavatam. And we'll hear from you again next week. We will cover chapter 5 of Canto 2. Thank you. Hare Krishna, everyone.
Thank you, Mataji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Asana.
Thank you, Mataji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Hare Krishna Mataji. Dandat Pranam.